Hello, I'm Maarja Kruusmets, and today I have a wonderful opportunity to interview one of my favorite authors, Nathan Van Coopsiga. Thank you so much, Nathan, for taking some time to talk to me. Well, I've known you for several years now, but most Estonians are unfamiliar to you and your writing. So can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. I have been writing for a little over 10 years, and I've been publishing for most of that time. And I got my start writing time travel adventure stories, and that's really been kind of the niche that I've stayed in for the most part. I've written a couple of other series as well, but I have found that that's what resonates with readers, and the way that the little world that I've created, the way that time travel works in my world has connected with people who have really enjoyed it. And now I'm continuing to write a new series, but in the same universe that I originally created. And I'm having a lot of fun with it. I'm kind of branching into a little bit more of mystery and detective, but also still writing time travel. It's just always been an interest of mine. So I didn't start writing till I was, in my late 20s, I guess, but it was always something that, made me think. And it's fun to be able to publish stories that involve time travel.
Okay, but what other genres have you written?
So I've also written a more middle grade kind of, maybe more young adult adventure called Faster Than Falling, which is a sort of a steampunk sky pirate adventure story, which was the very first story I ever wanted to write. And it took me a few years to finally come up with it, but and actually feel like I was ready to take on that project because it involved so much world building. But that was the first idea I ever had for a story that I really thought stuck with me. And then I also wrote another series called the Kingdom of Vengeance series, it's got 2 books in it now, and I'm hoping to write a 3rd book. And it's kind of a fun mashup of modern and medieval. So we have a modern feudal system where the basic premise is that King Arthur's knights no longer ride horses, they drive cars. And so it's kind of a fun world in which they get to race around in muscle cars and also still have sword fights. And it's a fun combination. So yeah, those are the other series I write.
Okay, I have to say that I absolutely love the Kingdom of Vengeance series because you have such a good female character there. So I always enjoy the stories that are not about just strong men, but about strong women who, can do everything. And she can build cars, and she can fight with a sword and do all kinds of things. So I do hope that there will be other books in the series. But what are your most well-known books?
The most well-known would be the first couple books in my In Times Like These series. And Times Like These came out in 2012, and it's found a lot of readers over the years. And one of the reasons people like it is because it gets into some of the details of how time travel would work in the real world if you really take into account some of the things that would happen if this was possible. And I think the reason why it connected with people, because I took into account those things, like the earth is moving, and there's factors that you have to consider when you're dealing with time travel that a lot of people kind of gloss over. If you watch a lot of time travel fiction in film or on TV or read other books, many people just skip over some of the pretty obvious issues with time travel. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to address the issues. And even though it kind of opens up this Pandora's box of problems, I wanted to just create a world where those problems were problems and you had to live with it. And so that, I think a lot of people liked that take on time travel and being able to think through a system of getting around that actually would work if these particular, I invented a particle called the gravitite particles. And if those were possible, then all the rest of the internal rules of the story work. But after that, the most popular book I've written is probably the Chronothon. I think it's probably the best best read and best liked overall in terms of the amount of people that have read it. And that one is a time travel adventure race, which is basically the characters go on this adventure through time that's a lot like The Amazing Race, where it's a competition and each level of the race is a different time period. So it goes through history and then also into the future. And that's a lot of fun. One of the reviewers who was in one of the other Goodreads time travel groups called it the sampler of time travel, where you don't just go to one time period, you get to go to, 8 different time periods and experience all kinds of fun time travel hijinks in one big adventure.
Mm-hmm. But how much research did you put into those books? I mean, did you research physics when you invented the world and the laws of time travel, or have you looked up the history that your characters visit?
Mm-hmm. And that is probably one of the most time-consuming parts of the writing, especially writing the Chronothon, because I visited so many different places, mm-hmm. Egypt and Rome, and at one point they go on board the Hindenburg, which was a lot of fun. I remember I spent so much time reading about that Hindenburg disaster, and people who are familiar with the disaster will hopefully appreciate that the actual characters that are on there were all real people and they were where they were supposed to be, because that was such an interesting. I found this amazing blog which had detailed where everyone was at the time of the disaster, which rooms they were in, what they were serving for lunch that day. Everything. I tried to get as many details right as possible. And even the characters that Ben, my main character, interacts with and how he gets out of the Hindenburg, things like that, are all based in reality. And I had fun with that. And I think it adds an extra level of authenticity to a story that the reader may not even notice. But if you do go down a research rabbit hole and look, it will hold up most of that. So there are things that I just make up and they have to take some liberties here and there. But I tried as much as possible to use real life and real history to make the story work, and then just sort of insert my characters into those real places and let them have fun.
But what about the future? You have quite interesting future that you've envisioned in your books, and sometimes I feel that some of the things are already happening. So when you write about the future, how do you do that?
And that's interesting, because sometimes as a science fiction writer, you're trying to predict things that mm-hmm. will come about. And oftentimes, like you said, they're not that far into the future, or they already exist, or they're on the edge of existing. Mm-hmm. So, and I think that that's where science fiction writers can be the most effective, because they're writing something that's very believable. Even though it doesn't exist yet, everyone can see the possibility that it's going to, whether that's artificial intelligence or, when in the second or third book, I invented something called the metaspace, which is now, those who saw the announcement this past year, they even called it meta, which I thought was funny. In the metaverse, they're calling it in real life. So sometimes science fiction just precedes, reality, not by much. And it's always been that way. Science fiction writers have come up with really interesting ideas throughout the centuries of, they've been writing, and it's just some of those things come true. And oftentimes for me, I'm not picking things so far in the future that that's not going to happen. Somewhat deliberately, I'm trying to pick things that I might pick up in a popular science magazine, or just ideas that are already out there. Or if it's something I just come up with on my own, it's usually based in current science. So it's not that far-fetched.
Mm-hmm. Do you have your own favorite story in times like this series?
That's tough. I kind of view them all as one big story. So it's hard to break them up into little bits. There's definitely certain scenes that I really enjoyed writing. And at the time, usually when I'm writing it, I'm trying to write the best possible book I know how to write. And then when I finish with that book, I'm trying to write the next best possible book I know how to write. And I always try to improve book to book. So there are certain elements that I'll see that I like the way I've done it, or I want to improve on it. So usually my favorite book is the book I'm currently writing. That's usually the way it goes, or, it's the last book I wrote. So I like to see my own evolution as a writer, but in terms of storytelling, I'm really, really proud of all of them. I'm really proud of the Kingdom of Vengeance stories, the sword fight and Warcar, even though they're kind of an unusual mashup of genre and not as many people pick them up because they don't know what they are. I'm very proud of those books and the way that they came out structurally and the characters, and I had so much fun writing those. And then in times like these, I like all of those stories as well. And just some of the relationships. Dr. Quickly as a character was a lot of fun to create. I like even some of the side characters that I just enjoyed coming up with and meeting. So there's a lot of little scenes in there, but it's hard to pick one.
Yeah. But how do you come up with your side characters? Because I think every minor character that you've written, they're also colorful. They have their own personalities, their own looks. I know that sometimes you asked your readers to come up with some cool names, just as an inspiration, but nothing more. You make up the characters. So do you sometimes base your characters on real life people, or?
I started out doing that. In times like these is the most based on people I know in real life. The characters in that book, Carson and Blake and Robbie are all based on people that I know in real life, and most of them were in my wedding, and Francesca as well. They're all people I knew. So I don't necessarily recommend that though. As a writer, I learned after having written that they were so fleshed out in my mind because they were real people that I sometimes had a hard time translating that onto the page, how well I knew them. I think it came across that Ben knew these characters well, but I found it actually is more effective for me to make up a character because everything I know about them goes on the page. Therefore, the reader, when they come along, they know as much as I do about this character. And there may be some backstory things that don't make it into the story. But for the most part, if I want a character to be well-rounded, I have to make sure they're well-rounded on the page, not just in my mind. And that's why I think that it's beneficial to create imaginary characters as much as you can. Of course, you can base them on people's, personalities in general. But I'm piecemealing, a language that they're using, accent, background. I'm taking them from a variety of places, or I'm just making it up. And sometimes that's just fun, and I do also sometimes think about my narrator now, and I think about what kind of voices I know my narrator can do. And sometimes I'll even ask my audiobook narrator, say, hey, by the way, can you do this accent from, if I write a character and I make them Irish, can you do a convincing Irish accent? And if they can't, I might just make them from somewhere else, because it may not matter to the story, but it will matter in audio when someone's listening if it takes them out of the story if the voice doesn't sound right.
I've never gotten into audiobooks because I don't usually have this time to go around and just listen to books, but I know that it's quite popular now. So can you tell me how, like compared to the ebooks, how many people buy audiobooks? Is it like a trend now, or?
It is. It's very popular, and there are certain genres that do really well, and science fiction happens to be one of them. Science fiction tends to be a little bit longer books, so you get a little bit more bang for your buck in terms of if you're using an Audible credit or if you're purchasing an audiobook, because they are more expensive, and they're more expensive to produce. So, but the experience is, very akin to, hearing a play, or it's a performance. So you're paying for something that's not just, text, but you're getting an actor, a professional actor to really act this out and really do the voice as well. And it's great to hear it. I feel it's special. I'm excited every time I get to hear the narrator voice my story, because even though I wrote it, it's an entirely different experience for me hearing someone else read it to me. And I remember I was out walking the dog one day, proof listening to Time of Death, my first Paradox PI book, and I was laughing out loud, even though I knew all the jokes. I wrote the jokes in the book. However, my narrator's performance was so good that he was making me laugh out loud with his delivery, and I thought that was fantastic. If the narrator can bring that to the story, it just adds another layer of depth and enjoyment to it. So I'm at a stage of life where I have small children and I'm driving or at work, or I'm doing other things that I need to be listening to audiobooks because I don't have time to actually sit down and open the book, that my children won't let me. So there's no peace and quiet like that where I can actually just sit and read. So I squeeze it in any way I can, and audio has been a lifesaver for me. I definitely read far more books a year in audio than any other format.
Well, you're a self-published author. So I guess you had to learn like a lot of things through this process. Can you tell me what made you decide to be self-published, and what does this process of publishing a book on your own contain?
Sure. It used to not be very feasible before 2011 or so, when the Kindle came out. That really changed things. And also Amazon created print on demand. And print on demand basically just means that as a publisher, whether you're a traditional publisher or an independent publisher like myself, you don't have to pre-print all the books, because the biggest issue before was you would have to print 5,000 copies of a print book, and then you'd have to somehow distribute it. And you have to set up distribution. It was very difficult. And Amazon took that problem away, and they said, okay, we're just not going to print the book until someone wants the book. And then someone clicks buy, and then they have a machine that will actually just take your interior file of your book, they put your cover on it, and they ship it right out. I remember I was blown away the first time I ordered proof copies of my own book. It was a Saturday morning, and I ordered them around 11 a.m. that morning. I ordered 5 proof copies of my book. And by 3 p.m. the same day, I had a shipment notice that they were on their way. And I was floored that Amazon is capable of printing a book that fast and getting it out to you. And it's not always that way. Now there's some shipping delays and stuff with code. It's not quite as efficient, but it's possible. And that changed everything for the publishing industry. The whole world changed. And it opened up the doors to all kinds of writers who maybe were writing books that the traditional publishing industry weren't looking for, but readers were looking for. So there's so many markets. I mean, as readers, we read very broadly. However, as a publisher, you have to look at what will sell the most copies, especially if you're a traditional publisher, because you have to print 5,000 of these things to start, 10,000 or whatever you think is going to be the most efficient, number to sell copies of this book. And you're paying a lot of money up front on a bet. You're risking a lot, assuming that everyone's going to buy this book. Whereas as an indie, I can put something out, and then if it takes off, I don't have to worry about the supply demand issues. The supply is always there. And it gives me the freedom to take risks. It gives me the freedom to write things that I want to write, even though I'm not positive the market's there for it. I can kind of make my own market for things. And it depends on what your goals are too. If you're doing this where you have to put out a ton of books every quarter, like a traditional publisher does, in order to hope something hits so that you can pay your bills, you've got to put out a lot of books, and you've got to be very smart with your choices of which books you can produce. As an indie, you just have a lot more freedom because you get to be the publisher and you make those decisions. Although I do have to make hard decisions sometimes where a series just isn't taken off the way I want it to, and I have to devote my time differently. So sometimes readers are asking me to write more books in a particular series, and I would love to, but I have to focus my time. I only have a limited amount of time, so I have to focus my time on writing the books that I think are going to perform the best. That's when I put on my publisher hat. I have to yell at my writer side and tell myself to get back on writing the series that sells the best. How
did you find the first readers? Because had quite a quick start, I think, with your first book.
Everything takes a little while to get rolling. And I think when I put out a first book, I wrote it and then I was like, what do I do with this thing? And the place I started out was actually on Goodreads, which is, a great website for readers to go and find new books. It's very reader focused. You can go and find groups on there. You can find book clubs. And I found a little club of people who like time travel. And I started participating in there. I started participating in the book clubs every month and just interacting and making friendships. And then I, put my books up slowly and they started to gain some traction. I also found another author friend in there who I saw his books were doing well. His name was Todd Hodges, and he wrote The Never Hero. And I saw how well his book was doing. He only had one book out. I'm like, how on earth is he doing this? And I got some tips from him, and he pointed me in the direction of some other really smart writers who were doing well. And I'm a pretty social person, which is one of my kind of the pluses in my tool shed of tools. I can be very social and connect with people. So I used that as an asset, and I connected with a lot of other authors and learned from them. And I still to this day talk to other authors on a daily basis. I have a little group of friends who all write, and we share tips and struggles we're having. And it's just like having coworkers. Now, even though I'm working on my own in my own little world over here, I still feel like I have coworkers who are also doing well. And it's been fun watching each other kind of grow over the years and do well and learn from each other.
Okay. Since I've started to follow you when I first read your books, and actually one of the good things about Amazon is that you can do promotions. And I found your book for free the first in times like this. And then I was hooked, of course. And then I read the Chronicon, and well, basically the rest is history, as they say, because I read everything you've written and I loved everything you've written. So I think it's a really good opportunity to find new readers when you do promotions on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
But right from the start, I saw that you really like to communicate to your readers. So, okay, I did have a question for you. So can you tell me about how you do that? And you also have the group, the Tempest Fugitives, on Facebook. So yes, you can just.
I think it's really important because of the way that we have access to social media now and email, that we don't have to hide ourselves as authors anymore. And it's very rewarding for me to actually hear from readers. I really enjoy hearing when someone has read the books and some of the experiences they've had. And I've had some very moving letters from people or emails from people who have been affected by the books in ways that I would not have predicted. So I just think that I'm writing, fun escapist, adventure stories, but sometimes they really resonate with people when they get people through a hard time. Because it's a way for them to escape some suffering they're going through, or it's been a way for other people to connect with friends. So there's been quite a few friendships that have been formed through the community that we've created. The Tempest Fugitives is a Facebook group, of course. So everyone, if you're on Facebook, it's a great place to stop by, and everyone's very friendly in there. It's been a very welcoming environment, and of course, you've come on as a moderator now and helping to manage the group, and that's been fantastic. Having a little help there to help, keep it positive and keep the energy up there and have the content. But I think people feel very comfortable posting content in there that they know everyone would enjoy, things that, because we're all readers, we all love reading and science and time travel, obviously. So it's a great spot to share those mutual interests that we all have in common, and also to share other things that we may not have in common, but we get to know about each other. I've really enjoyed getting to know readers like yourself and others who I consider to be friends now. And we're not just, it's not a distant mean, it's physically distant, obviously, because you're in Estonia, but it's not a distant relationship anymore because it's been years and years that we've been communicating now. And because I remember mailing you a Kindle like years ago, like because you won it from one of the launch parties. That was like one of the early books, I think. And
that is
so
one of the best things, really. So thank you for that.
Well, it obviously worked out, right? You're still reading all my stuff, so it worked out.
A win-win.
Yeah, it's been really great, and I love those connections with readers. And I have an amazing review team and a beta reader team. There's people that read my stuff before it ever goes out in the world, which is fantastic, and you've been a part of that. And there's just been a fantastic amount of knowledge that has come back from readers, because it's not just a one-way street. It's not just readers or authors giving books to readers anymore. Now it's readers also having a chance to give back. And the books are better because of the readers that get involved. Not the proofreading that I get help with sometimes, and of course the beta reading. If I am writing something, and it gives me a ton of confidence being able to put something out to you and to others who read it first and get the first eyes on it and can tell me if something doesn't make sense. Because sometimes it's a mess in my head, especially writing time travel, where I have all these connections in my head, and sometimes it doesn't all make it on the page, and it needs to. So I feel great knowing that my first readers will have a shot at it before everyone else, and you'll be honest with me and tell me what you really think, and I have a chance to make things right if there's ever an issue. Usually there's nothing too dramatic that needs fixing, but if there ever is, I have the confidence of knowing you'll tell me.
Mm-hmm. The biggest problem is that you don't send us the whole book at once, but we have to sometimes wait for a week until you post the other chapters. So yeah, but the other times it's great. And I want to add about the Tempest Fugitives group that it has been a place that we don't talk about COVID or politics or anything bad that's going on in the world. So it's kind of a safe place, to come and just enjoy company of people who love reading. And it was your idea to start a book club. And we've been reading the time travel books. And I think it's great that in a book club, I read things that I've never heard about. I've discovered really great authors. And it's easier to plow through a book you don't like when you know that somebody else is doing that. So, and it's always been the way that somebody loves the book, the other one doesn't love it, and
right.
So it's kind of diverse group that we have, and it's the discussion is always interesting, and also that we've had some opportunities to interview authors, things that I've never imagined when we started the book club. So yeah, it's been quite an amazing time.
And you've done a fantastic job with book club and getting these authors to sit down to interviews. The fact that you got Jodi Taylor to sit down and talk with you, I think was phenomenal. A really great interview. And you've done a great job as your interview style and coming up with interesting questions. And I've really appreciated you doing that.
Okay, you're welcome. It's just my son. So my questions are finished. So do you have anything that you'd like to say to your New Estonians readers that will hopefully gain after the interview and the translated sections from the Warp Clock?
I always appreciate every reader, and Estonia is, now that I have some friends from there now. I have a couple of friends that I have you, and I was another one of my good friends that I play chess with, moved to Estonia, and I know it's a beautiful country, and though I've never been, it makes me feel good knowing that my books have made it over there. and at least we're connected that way. And it's a really amazing time to be a writer, in that, especially in this electronic world where we can communicate. The distance doesn't make a difference, and I can, a new reader in Estonia can read my book and can send me an email, and we can have a conversation about it, and start a new friendship, basically. And distance doesn't matter. And I think that that's a wonderful time to be alive. I think that's a fantastic time to be a reader and to be a writer. And I think if people take a leap of faith and jump into some of these books, I think that they'll find some fun adventures, maybe some original ideas that they may not have thought of before. I hope that every time I write a book, I try to write something new and add something fresh to the genre. Even though I've been reading time travel a long time, I do think that the books I write put a unique spin on things. And especially a series like Kingdom of Engines, where nobody's written that story before. Like, no one has written anything even really close to that. So while it's challenging to tell people what it is, I think once people go on that journey, when they find something fresh and new, it can be refreshing for them to go some new place that they've never imagined before. And I feel like I create this little world, and then I just open the door and invite people in. And it's an entirely different experience for everyone, because everyone's imagination is different. Everyone who walks through that door and experiences that world experiences it in a slightly different way, because their imagination is unique. So even though I might have set up the framework for it, the experience they're having is all theirs. So that's why, one of the reasons why I love hearing about people's experiences, because it might be different than mine, and it might be different from other readers that I've heard from. So each reader brings something unique and special to the world and the characters, and they reimagine these characters in new ways, and it keeps the world alive. So it's not just in my imagination. Now these stories are living in thousands of people's imaginations, and all these different unique takes on it. And I think that's something really special. And that's why I'm always excited to meet new readers and invite more people into these worlds.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And I hope you have a great day.
I really appreciate you taking the time to set this up. And it's been a lot of fun chatting with you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, bye.